Hello, hello. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here at the World Strategic Forum. I want to give a special thank you to the Ambassador Robin Bernstein and her daughter Julia Bernstein for inviting me and asking me to panel this discussion. Or moderate this panel. It is an honor to be up here in front of all of you and with this incredible panel. My company is called Remcoda. We are a global manufacturer and importer of products across the food service, janitorial, sanitation, and retail sectors. We manufacture and import product from 9 different countries across 4 continents, and we distribute our products to 15 different countries across 5 continents. So here at our panel, I just want to take the opportunity to introduce, first and foremost, Barbara Humpton, the President and CEO of Siemens Corporation. Barbara guides the company's strategy and engagement. Her company employs 45,000 people, serving customers in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. And in the fiscal year 2022, Siemens generated $18.6 billion. Thank you for being here, Barbara. We also have with us the Senior Vice President of Crisis 24, Chad Lesch. Chad is Crisis 24 is a risk management platform that monitors threats in real time using AI and expert verified risk assessments. Chad comes to the company after 15 years in a senior leadership position at the CIA, where he conducted operations by leveraging his technical skills in specialized military fields, strategic communication, issue advocacy, crisis management, and technology development. He executed multiple covert action programs on 6 continents that helped inform U.S. policy. Welcome, Chad. And last, certainly not least, we have the CEO of Cavotec, Mr. David Pagels. Cavotec makes the world cleaner, safer, and more efficient by providing connection and electrification solutions to decarbonize ports and industrial applications. Their company deals in everything in the supply chain that's physical, from ports to cranes, minings, tunneling, and all forms of transportation. Welcome to the panel, David. So we're going to give each panelist here an opportunity to take a minute or two to introduce themselves. So we'll start here first with you, Barbara.
Well, thanks, Remy, and thanks for the kind introduction. You know the basic stats, but maybe you don't know that Siemens is a focused technology company. In fact, Siemens is transforming the everyday for everyone. Chances are, if you arrived here in a car, it was either designed or manufactured using Siemens tools. If you're enjoying a safe and comfortable built environment, it's enhanced by Siemens automation. And if you're one of the lucky ones who got to ride a Brightline train, it was built by Siemens right here in the United States. So here we are working on technologies that we're all going to be using, but focus on the point where the digital world meets the real one. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but this is where the action is happening, the tech of the future.
Thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Chad Lesch. I work for Crisis 24, which is a risk intelligence wing of GardaWorld. GardaWorld is one of the largest full-scope security companies in the world, employing over 125,000 people, servicing over half of the Fortune 500 companies globally. My personal office, we were talking about responding to threats, et cetera. We're trying to assess and predict threats before they happen using anticipatory intelligence, powered by artificial intelligence and predictive analytics. We talk about being in a polycrisis world. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And our goal in the company is not just to help our clients navigate the multiple headwinds that they're facing today, but also be able to, with anticipatory intelligence, avoid those headwinds altogether, or even better yet, pivot their company to turn those headwinds into tailwinds to help amplify their supply chain resiliency, efficiency, and profitability. I'm honored to be here with these other guests and appreciate the invite. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is David Pagels. I'm the CEO of Cavotec. Previously worked for a railway company, Delner Couplers, in the infrastructure sector, but also then 15 plus years within the sourcing side. Cavotec, as more or less already pointed out here by Fred Wong from Port of Miami, we are pointing out and we are delivering the equipment for shore power. The shore power solutions, meaning we can turn off the engines on the vessels and therefore lower their emissions, reduce them down to zero by using our electrified solutions. The shipping line were the one going first, but now all of a sudden, also, I'm really glad to see that also we're doing now starting on the West Coast, but also on the East Coast now is happening to really turn off the engines when the ships and the big cruising ships are in the port. And that way we play a vital role in supplying those equipment. I'm really happy to be part of that journey.
Thank you. Okay, so what is the supply chain? The supply chain is an extremely complex set of transactions, trillions of dollars in value happening in real time, all the time, around the clock. It starts from the source, where the raw materials are made, how they're made, and then it goes all the way through this hyper-complex, multi-country, multi-continental, transcontinental process that takes you eventually to a final delivered product. So it's very, very, very complex. It's living, it's breathing, it's like an organism in a sense. And there's an organization to it that's extremely important. And when there is, like we saw during COVID, major disruption to the supply chain, the effects are incredible and unpredictable. And it's not just COVID. All kinds of events across the world can affect our supply chain. And at this moment right now, we are facing multiple challenges affecting the global economy. From the remnants of the COVID-19 pandemic, internal conflicts, massive inflation, environmental issues. So Chad, given that you spent 15 years at the CIA working on geopolitical conflict and advising US governmental policy, you are uniquely aware of the challenges that we're facing today and how to best prepare for an increasingly dangerous tomorrow. As of right now, we've got all kinds of things going on across the world. We've got the war in Ukraine. We've got war breaking out across the Middle East, threats of it increasing into a World War III. We have a threat of military conflict in our near future over Taiwan with an ever-growing China. We're in a global recession with spiraling US debt. And then there's the threat of the unknown. Very few people saw COVID coming and the shutdowns that would come from COVID. So who knows the next whopper we'll face? So without scaring us too much, Chad, what do you think about the state of the world and where are we going?
So thank you. I actually don't think you need to be in the CIA or formerly in the CIA to be aware of the multitude of threats that are out there. I think one of the things that might be surprising to a lot of people in the room is how many active conflicts are actually going on today. Either war, civil war, extremist terrorist activity, etc. You talked about Yemen, you talked about Ukraine, you talked about Israel, but many people don't know that there are actually 34 active engagements going on in this world at this time. And outside of the humanitarian impact that can have an extreme impact on supply chain, business operations, commodity, accessibility, et cetera. So I'm going to go through a quick list of 34, and we'll kind of level set from there. I have not memorized these, so forgive me while I look at my magic cheat sheet right here. So Afghanistan, Algeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Central Africa, Chad, no relation, Colombia, Congo, Ethiopia, Ghana, Iraq, the Ivory Coast, Libya, Mali, Mauritania, Mexico, Mozambique, Myanmar, Niger, Russia, Somalia, South Sudan, Syria, Tanzania, Togo, Tunisia, Uganda, Ukraine, Yemen, and now Israel and Palestine. Not a good outlook. What are there, about 217 countries in the world, and a good percentage of them are suffering significant conflict. So I think, first off, being able to be aware of where they are, understand how they affect our business, how we can provide humanitarian aid to the extent we can, but also use that information to navigate around it in a way, and then stay on top of the next threats that might be on the horizon. Certainly China and Taiwan is quite popular, but there's a lot of unrest, and I think that gets compounded by both ideological and economic conditions globally. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but here's to hoping that this can improve and we can improve with it.
So Chad, your company is analyzing all of these conflicts and many more, whether they're military, economical, geopolitical, risk factors across the spectrum. I think COVID and the shutdowns caught a lot of us flat-footed. If we wanted to do it better next time, I would say the shift from a reactive state to a more proactive state is in our collective best interests. So how do you work in helping further that shift and help companies prepare themselves for being more proactive and not reactive?
I think that's an excellent question. So the key point you said to me was reactive rather than proactive. Traditionally, risk management has been very focused on something bad happens in the world. We have human analysts, about 200 of them at Crisis 24, that validate the information, try to cross-court it across multiple sources, and then distribute that information to our partners to make sure that their people and their properties are safe. That's good, and that will always exist. Where we need to pivot to, and where we're pivoting with the use of artificial intelligence empowering predictive analytics, is finding trends. Something at a level of compute that is almost impossible for a human analyst or a team of human analysts to stay on top of. So looking at the world 12 months out, assessing political stability, 6 months out, understanding commodity, import, export, global supply, assuming demand stays the same, and certainly short-term security, 2 weeks out, 2 months out for chief security officers. I think there will always be black swan events. I'm not going to be able to predict the lottery number. If I did, I would not be here. But there's been massive advancements, and the initial results that we've gotten with our tool have shown to be over 82% accurate 12 months into the future, which is a starting point. And we're looking to improve that. So embrace the technology that's out there, apply it to looking forward rather than backwards. And I think that can help better position those companies to navigate those headwinds, avoid them, and even, again, turn them into tailwinds to accelerate them forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I think creating more resiliency in the supply chain is crucially important. When COVID hit, and it really affected the imports that the United States and other countries were getting out of China, we realized that being hyper-reliant on any one country or any one region of the world opens up your company to be vulnerable. One of the things that we did as a global manufacturer importer is we recognized that diversifying outside of having just Chinese supply was a mandate of the company. And so when COVID struck and things shut down out of China, we were very, very fast in setting up dual and triple sourcing for all of the products that we make. And working out of Latin America was one of the things that helped us get an advantage over many of our competitors. It helped us win programs, win business from incumbents that have held on to those contracts for a really long time. And so having dual sourcing, having triple sourcing of all of your products, I think is critical, because as soon as another conflict breaks out or another pandemic or some unforeseen thing, you don't know if your supply chain is going to falter. And so being proactive and saying, now I'm going to start making relationships in Latin America. I'm going to start figuring out how I can make my products or making investments inside the country or nearshoring. It should be a way that we as business leaders are thinking right now. And so I want to pass the conversation over to Barbara. Barbara, when the pandemic happened, things broke, and companies scrambled to figure things out. So we talked about the shift from going from reactive to proactive. How has Siemens been proactive, and what steps are you taking today to organize your supply chain to remain resilient when the next inevitable disruption occurs?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have a mindset. I actually host a podcast called The Optimistic Outlook, and its premise is that it's times of disruption that give us the best opportunity to shape the future. I mean, think about it. When we hit a disruptive moment, the first thing that everybody asks is, what do we do now? And that's the perfect moment for people with great ideas to step into the breach and help to rearrange how things work. So during COVID, when we were dealing with single sources of supply, and this question of, we had sourced things where we could find the lowest labor available to us. I mean, let's be real. We had spent decades as business seeking low labor costs somewhere in the world, and suddenly realizing that she who can actually secure supplies wins the day. It was necessary to start thinking differently. What about health arbitrage? What about energy arbitrage? And as it turned out, in the US, we've got relative health, we've got relative energy security, and it made it clear that US sources of supply, or I'll say American sources of supply, North and South America, would be absolute game changers for us. Now, the trick is using the digital tools that are available to us. So one of the things I hope we'll talk about as this conversation unfolds is the power of the ability to use digitalization to better inform the decisions we're making in the supply chain, but also to better inform how we make things, period. And I'll leave that as a teaser.
Great. All right. So the supply chains, they involve a lot of production, they involve a lot of transportation, consumption. It's generally releasing greenhouse gases. It's depleting natural resources. So we all agree that one of the things we need to do with our supply chain is make them more sustainable. But it's good business. And so I want to ask this question: why is it necessary to have sustainable supply chains? And what can we do to be leaders in our field? So one of the things that we've seen in the hospitality and food service space is that there is this global shift of single-use plastics and foam over to more environmentally friendly alternatives. These are biodegradable products, compostable products, and at minimum, recyclable products. We saw this with one of our major airline clients, Delta Airlines. They had a mandate to transition all of their single-use products to plastic-free. And for those that don't know a lot about the paper-making process, it's very hard to make a hot cup, a cup that can hold coffee and tea, that also can hold iced beverages and alcohol, that performs as well as their less environmentally friendly alternatives. So plastic-free cup. Now, that involves innovation. Something simple like a cup actually involves a lot of innovation. And we're seeing that across various different products. Now, there are certain things that are driving this innovation. On the one hand, it's government regulations. there are a lot of examples of parts of this country where you can no longer import and distribute foam, styrofoam products. So the government is mandating that. So when the government steps in and says, hey, this is the new regulation, then people who are providing those products, they need to adapt and innovate. And the consumers of those products need to change their buying habits. But there's a more powerful shift. There'll always be a more powerful shift than government regulation. And that is consumer sentiment and consumer spending power. So if the consumer starts to vote with their dollars and chooses to buy products that are better for the environment, then the people who are providing products will be forced to innovate in order to capture that demand. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is be a leader in this transition. I call it the green rush, the transition from single use to sustainability. Now, Barbara, you have your own example of how you guys are doing this. So I'd love to hear from you. Can you discuss the significance of companies aligning their value chains with environmental sustainability goals? What that's meant for Siemens, and how by you being a leader in your field, you are creating not only a better future for the world, but creating massive value for Siemens. That is your job.
Is my favorite question ever. Listen, in 2010, Siemens took a look at the global megatrends to say, what's happening in the world that would impact our business? How can we bring our know-how in electrification, automation, digitalization to bear in a world that's ever changing? And Siemens identified 5 megatrends: climate change, urbanization, the aging demographics of people everywhere, the ever-increasing globalization of the supply chain, and the digitalization of everything. And we built a business strategy to address the global megatrends. Can I just give everybody here a piece of advice? If you have an organization that you need to align, look at the megatrends. If you build your how, your why around inexorable forces, you will grow with the evolution that's happening all around you. And this is exactly what's happened. I mean, I'm going to challenge you on one thing on the green rush. Does it have to cost more? Not necessarily. Turns out we have tools today, digital tools, that will help us design things that are more sustainable, help us design things more purpose-built for the urban environment, or to help make people more productive through longer lives as our populations age. These technologies can help us actually save cost as well as we define and design new products. And I'll just point everybody's attention to one of the building blocks of this future, the digital twin. Siemens makes software that is the most comprehensive digital twin maker. We have the ability to create things virtually before we ever begin to experiment with real resources. And we can decide on optimal designs that are going to meet our sustainability needs, et cetera, and only then build. And one of the things I like to think about is, in the past, when we had to deal with the agility of addressing risks around the world, it meant that we had to be prepared for what we thought was most likely to happen. Anybody remember the topic of a stockpile of ventilators that we thought we needed at the beginning of COVID? Well, what if we didn't need to stockpile every physical item we might need in case of an emergency, but instead could have a reserve of digital twins of the things we might need to make, and then access to a manufacturing base with tools that are more agile, additive manufacturing, reprogrammable manufacturing lines. Then we could make at the point of demand. This is the promise of technology to help us be both more sustainable and more successful in our business strategies.
I love that. So So that's so great, Barbara. So imagine if instead of needing to stockpile the ventilators, Siemens had 3D printers and had a digital blueprint and design of how to make a ventilator and could make it immediately when it's needed and where it's needed.
We had an automobile manufacturer who did just that. VinFast had opened up a new line. They had modeled out their line using Siemens digital twin technology. When the call came to create ventilators, they switched over the line and in a matter of weeks were manufacturing ventilators. According to a digital twin that had been captured, Medtronic made their design available to them and boom, we were in business.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And also that type of technology will help make our supply chains more resilient, because if we can bring manufacturing back into the United States, it's been outsourced for so long now that we've lost the capability of manufacturing products here in the United States. So we rely on these international trade routes that are subject to potential disruptions. But if we could bring manufacturing back, and I know that's one of your initiatives, Barbara, at Siemens, then it will strengthen the country. And I think it's a important part of our national security.
Remy, we're talking about this as a lot of people have been concerned about globalization. We're talking about glocalization. The idea that you can design anywhere and make everywhere, make closer to the point of need. So we can globalize our ideas, but we can localize the manufacturer and shorten supply chains.
And I appreciate you challenging me earlier. So I want to go back for 1 second to the example of a food service product. So if you are living in a developing country, and you are worried about putting food on the table for your family, you are not going to choose to spend more money on a product because it's good for the environment. So there's 3 things that are going to make sustainable products more effective and more widely distributed. One is, like all technologies, if you remember the flat screen TV used to be like $15,000 to get one, now it's $150. It's the same thing with any type of technology. So making environmentally friendly food service products or any type of product cheaper over time through technological advancements brings down the price, makes them more widely acceptable to people. The other is performance, like I mentioned with the cups. Everybody hates those paper straws that dissolve in your mouth. So people are not going to choose a worse performing product just because it's better for the environment. And the third is education. People need to know that the product that they're buying is good for the environment, for them to choose between a product that's good for the environment and bad for the environment, to choose the product that's good for the environment. I want to take the conversation over to you, David. Your work touches so many aspects of the supply chain, from the ports to mass transportation, tunnels, etc. Can you explain some of the critical things you see happening today that will build a more sustainable supply chain for our future?
Okay, absolutely. I fully agree with both Chad and the other discussions here before. I think we need to see the globalization, that's key. We need to see the dual sourcing, dual supply chain, that's also key in order to be prepared for whatever to come. But on top of that, we need to see sustainability as a natural part of the supply chain. It's not something we just add on and all of a sudden we need to think about sustainability. It has to be embedded into it so that we take it into account. It has to be natural in the way we do things. We have electrified short power in a lot of ports. We have retrofitted 600 vessels, container vessels around the world with shore power, meaning when they come into the port, they turn off the polluting diesel engines and all of a sudden they go on electrical power instead. Those 600 vessels that we have retrofitted so far equals to 5 million cars off the road. So it's just a matter of it has to happen. It's not a matter of when. And I strongly believe in yes, to some degree, regulations that must be the kickstarter for things to happen. But on top of that, it is exactly mentioned before. It has to be driven by the money, the consumers, and on top of that, of course, investors. Investors want to invest in companies that are driving the sustainable technology and the green tech companies that is driving us towards a better world. And therefore, I'm really pleased, and I'm sitting here coming from Sweden. Europe. And of course, I'm a little bit jealous about the thing that is happening here in US in terms of the shore power installations on cruising ships and port terminals. We will come, eventually we will come also in Europe. It's happening there, definitely within 5 years we're going to have 80% of our ports electrified. But really coming with a strong force here in US, and I'm really glad to be part of that.
Thank you, David. All right, well, building a more resilient supply chain, it requires infrastructure and investment. So let's explore the essential infrastructure and investments required to enhance the efficiency and stability within the global value chains. In 2013, Barbara, the Siemens Corporation invested over $500 million in U.S. manufacturing expansion, creating over 1,700 new jobs right here in the United States. So Barbara, how important of a role do you think reshoring and manufacturing here in the United States plays in the economy? And do you see this as a key advancement in making our supply chains more resilient?
This is absolutely key, and not only in the United States, but everywhere around the world. We talked earlier about, going to the lowest point of labor. Turns out the new tools of manufacturing are going to make each worker so much more productive that it's going to sort of neutralize the labor factor in the cost equation. Think about that. We've got more and more technology coming into manufacturing. A simple example is a factory in Germany that we have that makes literally hundreds of thousands of parts that go into manufacturing applications every year. They'd been producing, for decades and began to introduce these new tools of automation. And over the last 10 years have increased productivity tenfold, have not laid off a single person. The workforce is the same size. They've just become incredibly more productive. Being able to make things is vitally important for an innovation ecosystem as well. And I'd refer the audience to a foreign policy article that really demonstrated how we had always prized the innovation ecosystem of the United States. It's true, we spend a lot on research and development, but as we've observed how China has risen in their own ability to innovate, so much of that is because they've learned how to make and have been able to innovate into adjacent sectors. We need the entire value chain in economies around the world. Manufacturing is core to economic success, and I like to say Siemens is a national asset, and as in fact we're in the backbone of economies all around the world.
I think it is. And you know what was very interesting? Prior to the Trump administration's trade war with China, we were far more reliant as a country on manufacturing out of China. And in came Trump and in came the tariffs, and we began a gradual decoupling. And COVID, like all things, acted as an accelerator. And the U.S. is now producing a greater percentage of its products outside of China today than it did before the Trump administration's trade war. And one of the things we're seeing, actually, is the Chinese themselves are expanding outside of China. So the Chinese are setting up factories in Vietnam, in Indonesia, throughout Southeast Asia. The Chinese are coming to Mexico because they want to be closer to the market here, the US market, and they're setting up their factories in Mexico. And then US policy with trade agreements to the Latin American countries, the new USMCA has made it easier and more accessible to set up trade partnerships, manufacturing partnerships in the Americas. That's been something that our company has focused on doing. We have manufacturing in Colombia, in Mexico. We're making a lot of our products there. It has the benefit, of course, of having shorter lead times. So having this sort of proactive approach, setting up manufacturing in the Americas, or if you can do it within the United States, is a key part of making our supply chains more resilient. But we still have to move the product around. So if you're making product in Colombia, like our factory in Barranquilla, we're bringing vessels container ships up into Miami. When I went with the ambassador to the Dominican Republic, we set up some trade and manufacturing partnerships there, again, bringing products through our ports. So the efficiency in the ports is absolutely critical. And David, this is what you live and breathe all day. So if the speed and efficiency of our supply chains are pivotal to the global economy, and we all remember the congestion in the ports during the supply chain crisis and how so many factors from truck drivers to container stacking regulations played a role in slowing things down. What do you see as the key infrastructure investments happening now and needing to happen to create the efficiencies we need?
I think the global trade is reliant, and it was as you just mentioned, it was super obvious after the COVID and during the COVID that everything was clogged and it was impossible to get things through the ports. So I think they're driving their ports in a sustainable way, but also to increase the efficiency there. And it's as done in Siemens, it's not a matter of threatening jobs, not at all. It's a matter of just making it more efficient to be able to run more things through the same setup that you have today. But of course that requires investments, and it also requires some brave port operators that actually see the long-term view where we're heading. But definitely we have solutions that could make it more efficient, but at the same time also more safer. We have mooring systems that actually enables you to take off the mooring lines, and mooring lines is also a safe situation where it actually snaps off in bad condition and damage a lot of people and hurt them. And that is also something. So whatever, we need to look at all the various parts in the whole port structure in order to make the whole supply chain more efficient.
Thank you, David. All right, well, we have time for a few more questions. So I'm going to drive the conversation over to the digital world. So we live in a digital economy. We live in a digital world. It's not even the way it was 5-10 years ago. Every single year, things seem to be moving faster and faster and faster, and our lives become more ingrained with our technology. You guys remember that invention where you would go outside and hail a cab with your hand? Nowadays, everyone's just using Uber. The things that we're buying are digital. Pretty soon, through things like the metaverse, I think we're going to be spending more time potentially in the digital world than even in the regular world. And all of us are victims of keeping our head down and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling on our phones. So with emerging technologies like the Internet of Things and autonomous systems like the autonomous driving cars that we're probably going to see pretty soon, with AI, with machine learning, etc. We have now introduced new areas of vulnerability, new areas where we as a people are under threat. And these new areas require increased security measures and awareness. So there are real world threats to our value chain, and they come from various sources. For one, they can come from rogue actors, such as hackers or cyber criminals, seeking to exploit vulnerabilities in our supply chain infrastructure systems or steal sensitive data, disrupt operations. They can come from insider threats. We've all had that disgruntled employee where after we let them go, we're like, oh no, they had access to all of our sensitive material. What are they going to do? And then they don't sign the non-disclosure, non-disparagement agreement to get their severance, and you're like, oh boy. Then there's nation states, increased in cyber espionage or economic warfare. They may target our supply chains to steal our intellectual property or disrupt our critical infrastructure. And so, Chad, you can give us some of the inside baseball here. So we can really understand what we're up against. Can you share some real-world examples of active penetration of our key supply chain, energy, logistics, agricultural fields, now and from your time in the CIA?
Thanks. I can't give the insider information, but I can certainly tell you what's reported in the paper in that regards. I think you nailed it on the head. You know, with new technology, new ways of interacting with the world, also come new threats. You mentioned state actors, non-state actors, non-state actors acting on the behest of state actors, as well as the internal threat problem. What I can say is that the exposure that we have in the commercial sector with communications, medical facilities, energy, supply chain, public transportation, et cetera, if attacked by state or non-state actors, would essentially be an act of war. And that's something else we're, I think, figuring out politically, where are the battle lines, if you will, with that. And there's been some recent articles talking about that. I can't go into our response or certainly our counteroffensive capabilities, but a strong offense is not enough, even if we go back to the traditional mutually assured destruction approach to it. I think in the commercial sector, investing in cybersecurity equal to the growth that we're building with the new technological advancements is key. Unfortunately, it falls into the expense center, not as much as the revenue center, so sometimes it gets pushed to the side. But I would encourage everyone to work with experts in this field to build up that security and resiliency so we can take full advantage of the new technological capabilities and mitigate the risk that we have with that.
Thank you. And Barbara, in Siemens, you've transitioned your company's focus onto platforms and democratizing technology. And you've stated that you believe that the true purpose of technology is to expand what is humanly possible. And your company has moved from a focus solely on making things and physical stuff to about data. So this must expose Siemens to significant risk from cyber threats. And you just stated earlier that you consider Siemens to be an asset, a national asset. So protecting your company sounds like a national security priority. Why is the shift to digital so important to you? Are you exposing us as a country to risks? And how are you ensuring the safety of your company's information, your customers' information?
Yeah, let's start with the why of technology. And you've seen over the last couple of decades the creation of the Internet of People and how technology has made our lives easier. Well, I'm going to tell you that this next decade is about people creating the Internet of Things. And we're talking an order of magnitude more in connectedness. And the use of data is going to be critical in making everything work better for us. Now, think again about this. You mentioned the term metaverse. And a lot of people have said, oh, the metaverse, who's ever going to use it? And because when you look at it initially, it appears to be something that maybe gamers would enjoy. Well, people aren't looking to technology to help them escape reality. They want technology to make reality better. And that's what we've been working on, bringing the tools that have been innovated across this ecosystem into the real world. To do that, we've recognized the need to be responsible. So one of the things Siemens started was the Charter of Trust. Imagine industry saying, we know that we're moving faster than a lot of governments could possibly keep up when it comes to emerging technologies. So let's make the pledge ourselves to be responsible and follow tenets of good stewardship of cybersecurity. We've hired thousands of cybersecurity experts who are embedded into every part of our organization. And I, as a leader inside Siemens, consider it my responsibility to continuously do things like exercises to make sure that the team is prepared and understands what's expected of them in case of a cyber breach. But something I learned years ago from a cyber expert is that we have to assume that the cyber actor is already inside our enterprises, and think differently, not so much about building moats and protecting ourselves, but instead asking, how would we make it more and more and more difficult for bad actors to do harm inside the systems we're responsible for? Just yesterday, I was with the CEO of a health system who we engaged in a conversation about the cybersecurity of the operational technology systems within his hospitals, because that's where they see the greatest cyber threat. So any of you dealing with operational technology know that we do, the industry overall is deeply engaged in cybersecurity, but the number one thing for all of us to be aware of is we've got to keep our systems current. I'll leave it there.
All right, well, that wraps up our time today on the panel. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our panelists here, Barbara, David, and Chad, for your insights. We really appreciate it. Thanks again to the wonderful Ambassador Bernstein and Julia for inviting me. And thank you all for listening. It's been really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.